Come, sit down. Let me ask you something. Is there someone in your life right now, someone you have trusted with your money, your ideas, your connections, your future, someone you would stake everything on? Think about that person carefully, because this story is about what happens when that person turns out to be something completely different from what you believed. This is the story of Chidi, a Lagos man, a builder not of buildings but of businesses. A man who started with nothing, an idea and a friend he trusted with his life. That friend's name was Emeka. And what Emeka did slowly, deliberately, over 7 years while Chidi's back was turned, while Chidi was working 18-hour days building something he believed they were building together, what Emeka did is the kind of betrayal that does not just take your money. It takes your belief in people. It takes the version of yourself that trusted freely and loved generously and assumed the best. Come, let me tell you what happened. Chidi and Emeka had been friends since secondary school in Enugu, 30 years. The kind of friendship that has its own language, shared references, old jokes, the particular shorthand of two people who have known each other since before they knew themselves. When Chidi moved to Lagos at 26 with an idea for a logistics company, it was Emeka he called first, not his brothers, not his father. Emeka, he said, I need a partner, someone I can trust completely, someone who will work as hard as I work and care as much as I care. I want it to be you. Emeka said yes before Chidi finished the sentence. They started Shabros Logistics in a single rented office in Surler. 1 desk, 2 plastic chairs, a second-hand computer. Chidi handled operations and client relationships. Emeka handled the finances and legal paperwork. They divided the company equally 50-50 because that is what you do when the person across from you is not just a partner but a brother. For the first 3 years they worked like men possessed, 18-hour days. Weekend after weekend, Gozi, Chidi's wife, patient and steady, would bring food to the office on Saturday evenings because she knew they would not stop to eat otherwise. By year for Shabros Logistics had 12 staff members, a fleet of 7 vehicles, and contracts with 3 major Lagos companies. They had built something real, or so Chidi believed. It started in year 3. Small things at first, the kind of financial irregularities that have innocent explanations if you trust the person responsible for them. An invoice that did not quite add up, a vendor payment that seemed high, a client deposit that took longer than usual to appear in the company account. Chidi noticed some of these things. He raised them with Emeka. Emeka explained them. Chidi accepted the explanations because this was Emeka, 30 years, a brother. What Chidi did not know, what he had no reason to suspect, was that Emeka had opened a second company, quietly, a logistics company registered in his own name alone. He called it Chibrex Logistics, close enough to Shabros to confuse, different enough to be technically separate. He had been redirecting clients, not dramatically, not all at once, one by one, slowly over 18 months. He had been approaching Shabros clients privately and offering them slightly better rates through Chibrex, rates he could afford to offer because the capital funding Chibrex had come from Shabros accounts. He was using Chidi's money to build a company to replace Chidi's company, and he was doing it while sitting across from Chidi at their shared desk every morning and saying, "Good morning, brother. What are we tackling today?" 7 years. That is how long it ran. 7 years of redirected funds, diverted contracts, a parallel company growing quietly in Emeka's name while Shabros began slowly, inexplicably, to Chidi losing momentum. And then in the 7th year, Emeka registered Shabros Logistics in his own name. Not Chibrex, Shabros, the original company, the one they had built together. He filed the paperwork quietly, exploiting a documentation gap that had existed since the beginning, a gap he had always known about and had always planned to use. And then he stopped coming to the office. Chidi noticed Emeka's absence on a Monday. He called, the phone rang out. He called again, voicemail. He told himself Emeka was sick. He told himself there was a family emergency. He told himself 100 things that a man tells himself when the alternative explanation is one he cannot yet afford to believe. By Wednesday, he was at a lawyer's office. The lawyer made 3 phone calls and 2 database searches and then turned his computer screen to face Chidi. Shabros Logistics, registered donor Emeka. Chidi looked at that screen for a long time. He said, and he told me this himself, he said the strangest thing happened in that moment. He did not feel rage first. He felt something much quieter, a kind of falling, like the floor of everything he had built had simply opened beneath him and he was suspended for a moment in the air above where it used to be. The rage came later in the car, driving home to tell Gozi. He pulled over twice on the Lagos Expressway because he could not see clearly enough to drive. By the time he reached home, his hands had stopped shaking, but his face told Gozi everything before he said a word. She met him at the door and she said simply, "Come inside." "Sit down, tell me," he told her. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "How much?" The accountant they hired the following week would spend 3 weeks going through 7 years of records. The final number, the total of what had been taken, redirected and stolen, was just under 40 million naira. 40 million naira, built naira by naira over 7 years of 18-hour days and Saturday evenings eating food. Gozi brought to the office because they would not stop to eat gone. Into a company that now legally bore the name Chidi had chosen. Chidi fought. Let me be clear about this. He fought hard and he fought correctly. He hired a good lawyer. He documented everything. He filed a police report. He pursued civil action. He gave interviews to business publications that covered the case. He did not collapse and he did not disappear. The legal process took 2 years, 2 years of court. Dates and adjournments and legal fees that cost money. Chidi was borrowing. 2 years of watching Emeka through his own lawyers deny, delay, and maneuver with the confidence of a man who had been planning this exit for a very long time. Emeka was not stupid. He had covered himself carefully. The paper trail was complicated deliberately. Some of the redirected funds had passed through enough accounts to be difficult to trace definitively. The company registration, while deeply wrong, had exploited a genuine legal gap. In the end, the court found partially in Chidi's favor. Emeka was ordered to pay restitution, a fraction of what had actually been taken. The Shabros name was returned to Chidi. Emeka's license was suspended for 3 years. It was not justice. It was a partial accounting, and partial accounting, after 7 years of systematic betrayal, feels like almost nothing at all. Chidi's lawyer said, "This is as good as it gets in these cases. I am sorry it is not more." Chidi nodded, thanked him, paid the final legal bill, and went home to figure out what came next. What remained after the court case and the lawyers and the 2 years of fighting was this: a company name, a damaged reputation in the Lagos logistics market because mud thrown during a public legal battle sticks to both parties regardless of who was right, a marriage that had survived but carried the strain of 2 years of financial pressure and emotional weight, and a Chidi who was different from the Chidi who had walked into that lawyer's office and seen his name replaced on a screen. Gozi held the marriage together with both hands during those 2 years. She went back to work full-time. She managed the household finances. She sat beside Chidi in court on every date that she could attend. She did not complain, not once, not publicly, about what Emeka's betrayal had cost her personally, the savings, the plans. They had made the timeline of their lives that had been rearranged without her consent by a man who had eaten at their table. Chidi rebuilt slowly, with 3 remaining clients who had stayed loyal through the legal battle, with staff members who had chosen to stay on reduced salaries because they believed in what he was building, with a new business partner, this time a formal agreement, lawyers involved, every clause documented, nothing left to trust. And everything left to verify. He said to me once, he said, "I used to think that trusting someone completely was the highest form of respect you could give them. Now I understand that trust without structure is not respect. It is naivety. Real respect in business, in friendship, in everything is building something that does not depend entirely on one person's character to hold together. Because character, under enough pressure, under enough temptation, is not always what you believed it was." Emeka, as far as anyone knows, is operating a smaller logistics company under a different name in Port Harcourt. He has never apologized. He has never explained. He has simply moved on, the way people move on when they have decided that what they took was worth what it cost. Let me tell you what Chidi's story teaches us. First, proximity is not the same as loyalty. Emeka had been beside Chidi for 30 years. He knew his family. He knew his dreams. He had eaten his food and held his children and stood at his wedding. And none of that history was enough to make him choose differently when the opportunity arrived. Closeness does not guarantee loyalty. Time does not guarantee loyalty. Only consistent character over time, especially when it costs something, guarantees loyalty. Watch how people behave when it is inconvenient to be honest. That is the real test. Second, protect yourself structurally, not just relationally. Chidi trusted Emeka with everything because he loved him. And that love was real. But love without legal structure in business is an open door. Every partnership, no matter how trusted, needs documented agreements, independent financial oversight, and clear accountability. Not because you expect betrayal, but because structure protects both parties and removes the temptation that unchecked access creates. Third, rebuilding after betrayal is not the same as returning to what was. Chidi did not rebuild Shabros into what it had been before. He built something different, smaller in some ways, more careful, more deliberately structured. And that version, he would tell you, is more truly his than the original ever was, because he built it with his eyes open, Betrayal, as devastating as it is, can strip away the naivety that was always a vulnerability. What you build after, if you choose to build, is built on something harder and more honest. There is a scripture, Proverbs chapter 11, verse 3. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. Emeka is operating a smaller company in Port Harcourt under a different name. Chidi is rebuilding in Lagos with his eyes open. Duplicity destroys the person practicing it. It just takes longer than we would like, and the innocent pay a price in the meantime that they should never have had to pay. If someone has taken something from you, your money, your ideas, your trust, your years, hear me. What they took does not get to be the end of your story. You decide what the next chapter looks like. Not them, you. That is Chidi's story. I have told you all of it. If it touched you, leave a comment. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you built something with? This is a safe place to speak. Share this with someone in business today who needs to hear that trust is not enough on its own. Structure matters. Documentation matters. Protecting yourself is not a sign of distrust, it is wisdom. Subscribe to Betrayal Patterns. Every week I sit down and tell you a story about the choices people make and the lives those choices build or quietly, deliberately destroy. I will see you next time. Take care of yourselves.